I'd like to welcome all the ones at home that are watching to Pressing On. Going to have an amazing night tonight. Looking forward to hearing the testimony. I'm going to go over here to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, starting at 12. It says, if you think you're standing strong, be careful not to fall. The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, He will show you a way out so that you can endure. All of us make hundreds of choices every day. Most choices have no right or wrong attached to them, like what you wear or what you eat. But we always face decisions that carry a little more weight. We don't want to do wrong, and we don't want to cause others to do wrong. So how can we make such decisions? If you choose one course of action, or you're making a decision, just always remember, does it help my witness? Am I motivated by a desire to help others know Christ? Does it help me do my best? Is it against a specific command in Scripture, and would this cause me to sin? Is it the best and most beneficial course of action? Am I thinking only of myself, or do I truly care about the other person? Am I acting lovingly or selfishly? Does it glorify God? Will it cause someone else to sin? In a culture filled with moral depravity and sin-inducing pressures, Apostle Paul encouraged the Corinthians about temptation. He said that, number one, temptations happen to everyone. Number two, others have resisted temptation, and so can you. Number three, any temptation can be resisted because God will show you a way out. God will aid you in resisting temptation by helping you, number one, recognize those people and situations that give you trouble. Number two, run from anything you know is wrong. You're not a coward if you run sometimes, you know what? Sometimes it takes more of a man or woman to run away from something. Nothing cowardice about it. Number three, choose to do only what is right. And four, pray for God's help. Five, seek friends who love God and can offer help when you are tempted. Running from a temptation situation is your first step on the way to victory. So just remember, sometimes it's okay to run. That don't make you a coward. Right? Okay, I'm so happy for tonight. I want Michael and Laura to come up if you would. I'm eager to hear my brother's testimony. God bless you, man.
My name's Laura. I'm a faithful believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm so excited to be here. And I was sitting back there, and I'm like, what do you talk about? What do you say? I'm not going to take away from his testimony, but this little guy means a whole lot to me. And I got to meet him. I got a call from his mama. Like many mamas, I get calls from, and she's like, I need some help. So what I get to do, the Lord has allowed me to do, is to help people and to help families. I got to talk to Michael on the phone. First time I'd ever met him, first time I'd ever talked to him, and immediately he had my heart. He was so funny. He was in a crisis situation, but he was still able to find humor, and he had joy in his spirit and in his heart. And when you talk about the power of prayer, Michael is here because he's got a praying mama, and I know that for a fact. When I got to meet Michael, he got another praying mama. So when I talk about the power of prayer and watching somebody turn their life around, that's Michael's story. I've heard him speak before, and the first time I heard him speak, I was like, duh, that's it. That's why the enemy's attacking him so hard. I go, the power he has in his voice, the anointing he has over his life, the charismatic way he has with words, the enemy wanted to use that for him, but now we're going to use it for the glory of God. And so just keep those people that need to pray, keep praying, because it works. It works. And that's a testimony for me about Michael, and I'm just so proud to be here to get to hear his story tonight.
Good evening, everyone. As most of you all know, I'm Michael Collins. I have a sobriety date of 7/3 of 2025. I've had many sobriety dates through the years, but this one really stuck. I'll start with my childhood, and I'll venture in to my ways of my addiction, and then what it's like now as a child of God. So as I was growing up, I had a great childhood. I had a mother and father and a stepmother who loved me very much. I had a really huge family. I grew up with a lot of sisters and one brother, but I was different. At 4 years old, I was diagnosed with a skin disease called polymorphic light eruptions. Basically, it means that I was allergic to the sun. And I was a kid that just loved being outside. And with that being said, this disease that scientists had little knowledge of was very painful to experience. It led to a lot of hate. It led to a lot of depression. And let's all face it, once I hit elementary school, kids are mean. Every name under the book I got called. And growing up, everybody, my family members, my mama, my mom, they would all introduce me as, hey, this is Michael, the $1 million miracle baby. And that being said, it's because I was born 4.5 months premature. I weighed 1 pound and 15 ounces when I was born. And every time I would get introduced like that, I'd just be like, hey, I'm Michael, I'm just a normal kid, but I'm allergic to the sun. And so my parents, I can only imagine how hard life was for them to try to take a child that had such a severe disease and be so painful that they would just have to watch their child face the pain that they had to face with very little that they could do. They took me to amusement parks, vacations. I really didn't ever have fun because I always had to be covered up with boonie hats, gloves, long sleeves, pants. I can remember being in Florida and trying to enjoy my time, and I didn't ever slow down, guys. I was a running, wild, tried to be as free as I could as a kid. And as I got older, I began to be rebellious. And I can remember a time that I picked up a skateboard. I don't really remember the age that I was at, but I remember I was in 4th grade. And that skateboard led me into a bit of a freedom. And I skated for a lot of my years. And whenever I was 13 years old, I went to a friend's house. And you would think at such a young age, you wouldn't ever be introduced to something that would grab a hold of you the way it grabbed a hold of me. But at 13 years old, I was introduced to crystal-like substance. And at first, I had tried it, and it was like that, the aha moment that everybody talks about. It didn't really stick with me right then. But after that, I started experimenting with a lot of other drugs. Anything that could literally take me away from life itself. Because I went through all of that trauma as a child. I really didn't know how to deal with emotions, but I knew that these drugs gave me this, it gave me a temporary feeling of this void that I had. And I never had a relationship with God because I was so angry with God. That was my very first resentment at 4 years old, was towards God, why he made me the way he made me, why I was so different, why I had to face all of these things. So like any kid would, they would rebel. And my dad tried his hardest to have a structured home. And along with my mom gave me all the freedom in the world because she just wanted to see me happy. I can remember a time at 15 years old, one of the most regretful times that I can think of. I was about 14 or 15 years old. I had come home to my mother's house. And this is how wild I was as a child. I thought it was okay to just come home and I could hide my being under the influence from my mother. And I walked in, and she knew right then and there that I was under the influence. And you know, I look back at it now, and I know that God had his hand on me then, because somebody that consumes as much drugs as I had consumed at such a young age that night, he had his hand on me. And my mom did what any other mother would do, and she called police officers. She called some people she had friends with to come over and scare me, but that wasn't enough. You know, I thought I had this figured out, you know. But little did I know what this life that I would live, this cool, sinful life that I thought I wanted, you know, was everything. And that led on into my adult years. And throughout my childhood and into my teenage years, I began at the age of 17. I got into downers, opiates. And I'm sure everybody knows right here in Austin, Indiana, Opanas was a big epidemic. And I found that that not only did these drugs bring in a large sum of money, it also brought me a little bit of what I thought was peace. And I thought I had control of it until I found a way that nobody else had found me to do. Nobody in my family would have ever thought that I would become an IV user. I fought so hard to get into this life, and I remember a doctor looking at me and telling me, "You fought so hard to get in this life, and now you're fighting so hard to get out of it." And he was right, man. I was so overwhelmed. And at the age of 18 or 19, I made a lot of poor choices that led me to not be present in my 14-year-old daughter's life. That same daughter that's sitting here today, that is now a part of my life, and it's all thanks to God. But I hate to say that it took 13 years for me to get my life together well enough. Not my only children, but at 19, I had another daughter, my daughter Shaylin, and that's when she was conceived, her mother looked me right in my face and was like, "You can sit here at this car lot and blast your life away, or you can come with me." And I quit Opanas cold turkey. It was very rough, and I quit doing methamphetamine, so I have a double addiction as well. But I thought that I was doing well, you know. but I still was doing addictive behavior. I still smoked marijuana. I still did Lortabs and Percocets, pain pills. But I thought in the back of my mind that if I'm just not doing this, if I'm not doing what, if I'm not shooting this up or if I'm not doing this, then I'm still doing great, you know? I sustained a job, but little did I know that I was just a functioning addict. So I spent 20 years of my life as a functioning addict, lying to myself, lying to my family. And I stayed that functioning addict, held a job, got a house, did everything that on the outside looked great. Really, it did. It looked great. But on the inside, behind closed doors, I did the most. And after 9 years of being with my two daughters' mom, she finally had enough. Enough was enough for her. And so she decided that the best thing for us to do was to split up. And that's when everything started crashing. After 9 years of not touching a needle, not touching methamphetamines, not touching no panas, when she left me, they say, nothing, you should never put anything on a pedestal above God. And I never understood that, but I definitely put a woman up on a pedestal higher than anything in my life. And when I lost that, I lost everything. I lost myself. And through that time, my family watched me start losing everything. At first, it was the house, all these worldly things, belongings, my vehicles. My family did everything they could to try to help me, whether it was buy me a vehicle, allow me to sleep in their driveway, allow me to come to their house. My mother is a recovering addict just like myself, and I would literally go into her house and she would let me stay the night, and she knew what I would be doing behind that closed bathroom door. And that's how much this addiction had a hold of me. I didn't care about her recovery. I didn't care that I was being disrespectful in her house. I didn't care if I was violent. All I cared about was getting high. And it was because I was so broken. I was so lost. And I led that life. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And it didn't take long until I was doing deathly amounts. I wasn't brave enough to take my own life, so I just thought, man, if I just do these drugs, man, this will be the end, and I won't have to suffer no more. I won't have to go through all this pain. I won't have to look back on these memories of my past. I won't have to do none of these things. I can just and I would sit there and I would, they say these foxhole prayers. I started thinking about suicide. I was so depressed. And I remember one day I was sitting up at a trailhead, and I couldn't bring myself to sit here and do what I was doing. And so many people were trying to reach out to me. I can remember sitting lonely nights in my van, and people like Linda Spicer, or even everybody, my mom, everybody was trying to pull me into a place to save me. Like, come to church, come do this, or come do that. And I just wouldn't. All of these people loved me, and I just wouldn't. I couldn't. And I got so out of my mind that I couldn't hold a conversation with no one. You could barely recognize who I was. I barely could recognize who I was, let alone tell you. And I continued to live this life. And nothing was going to keep me safe. Not my kids, mom, nobody. And I can remember my kids asking me Daddy, when are you going to get home? You know, I want to come home. I'd always say, oh, it'll happen. You know, those broken addiction. And I just kept continuing to just harm myself. And there was a time that I started to get sick. Anytime that I didn't have this drug, I would get like deathly ill. I would fall asleep wherever standing up, and if I didn't have something, it would make me sick. I was sick, and I just thought it was detox, like I was DTing. And I can remember a time. It was in the middle of the winter, and I had this van, and I guess I had blacked out, and according to doctors, they said I had like I had multiple like granny strokes, and my daughter's mom was banging on the door of my van, and she woke me up, and I was so sick and so tired, couldn't live this life no more, and I was begging God, like, just take it, just take me away, end this all. I got coherent enough to where I could start my van. I remember I looked it down at the gas gauge, and I was on E, but I was like, God, get me to my mom's house. But of all people, she was the only one that didn't give up. My dad couldn't understand what I was going through because he's never faced it. And so I drove that van on fumes all the way to her doorstep. And I banged on that door, and she opened that door, and just every time she would look at me, I could just see the pain and hurt, and brokenness in her heart to see her own son going through something so traumatic. And I fell to my knees and I begged my mom. I said, please help me. I can't do this no more. Can't. And she said, okay, but you can't stay here. And there was an individual, and I always remember this. There was an individual there. And he sat there and he tried to speak some truth into me. Because he was an individual that had endocarditis that had just got out of surgery. And my mom, of course, like always, would open her home up to anybody that was in recovery to try to help mend them back to life. Help anybody. She's got a big heart. And he sat there and he talked to me, and I sat there and I looked right at him. I was like, oh, that won't happen to me. That's not me. Okay, you'll see. My mom said, I can't have you stay here. You know, she had to protect her own recovery, and I got to say that that's probably one of the hardest things she's ever done. And she handed me $20, and she said, you'll have to give me a little bit. We'll make some phone calls. I said, okay. I really didn't know it, you know. I just knew that I wanted to get back to being a dad to my kids and being present and not live this life anymore. And those were one of those promises that, you know, I made to her that she knew I was going to break. She handed me that $20, told me to get gas and something to eat. And I'd love to say that that's exactly what I did, but it's not. You know, I did what any addict and active addiction would do. I took $2 out of that $20, put it in gas, and then I went and done the rest with what I needed to do. And my mom knew that there was something wrong. Because every time I'd go to my family's houses, they would talk about it and ask me questions and ask me if I was participating in certain curricular activities that within active addiction that is just has a lot of health risks. And I would always lie, but the tall tale signs like swollen eyes, swollen hands, chemical burns, things of that matter would come about. And I remember my mom said, "We got you a bed at sunrise." It was like, this was like on a Thursday, and she said I wouldn't have the bed until Monday. Okay, cool. I did what any other addict would do in active addiction, and up some money, and did the most that I could do. And I went and stayed at my kids' mom's house with her and her boyfriend. That's how sick I was able to stay in a home. The person that I was so broken from, just so that I could continue to do what I wanted. And you know, when I look back, I look at all the times that God had his hands into my life. You know, you don't think about it in that darkness, but you know, with recovery and sobriety and significant amount of time, you start to see the light that God was doing in your life. And when I say my mom is bound and determined, I will tell you right now, that woman will not give up. And if you try running, she's going to catch you. Because it was a Saturday, and I had wind up riding to the store with my kids' mom, and we come back, and you remember, I wasn't supposed to go to Sunrise until Monday, and I see my mom's car sitting in the driveway, and I start tripping. I'm like, I ain't going. It's not till Monday. I'm not going. And I get out the car, and my mom put the window down. She goes, "It's time, Michael." I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I was scared. It was like, you know, the devil had a hold of one arm and God had a hold of the other, and I'm sitting there going like this, you know? And my mom, I said, "All right, I'll go, but I'm doing what I got left." I looked right at my mom and I told her, I'm sitting in the back seat. There's an individual there, and he slapped a picture of my kids in front of me and said, "Well, won't you think about that?" And that just irked me even more. How caught and lost I was in my addiction. And I remember I got in my van, and you know, in my back of my mind, I had my keys, and I was going to get in that van, and I was going to take off. I really was. So I got in that van. I did what I had to do. I jumped in the driver's seat, was ready to go. I mean, I jumped in that thing, was, you know, ready to go. Went to start it up. Next thing you know, my kid's mom had me blocked in the front, and I threw it in reverse, and I went to put it, and I looked behind me, and my mom's got me blocked in. I mean, literally blocked me completely in. And I'm like, I'm hitting the thing, and I threw it in park, and I'm shut it off. I get out, and she goes, "Where do you think you're going?" I said, "I'm not going." And she goes, and I tell you, God will use people in your life to save you. When you have no idea you need saving. I knew I had to get off the drugs, but I didn't know I needed saving from something that I had no idea. And she said, "Michael, there's somebody on the phone for you." And I was so out of my mind. Like, I would, sure, so, plenty of you guys, some of you in this room have seen me like that. Plenty. And I was so out of my mind. But I somehow managed to grab the phone when she handed it to me. And it was like a voice of an angel on the other line. And when I say that, I say, this lady said, "Hey, hello, Michael, this is Laura Deaton." And I'm sitting there like, "Well, hey, what are you doing?" He goes, "Well, Michael, it's time. Well, honey, God's here for you." And it was as if I knew this woman all my life, And it gave me the strength to do it. Okay. I was scared. And I'm so thankful for that day. Because little did I know in 2021, I'd go into this treatment facility and I was so gone that I was hallucinating. Even after, they say after 24 hours of detoxing off of methamphetamine, and you usually start to get a little more calmer. And not for me. Not me. I was fighting people that weren't there. I was talking to people. I was hallucinating a lot. And so I finally I just crashed and I began to sleep a lot. And on my 5th day, I get woken up for a cigarette break. And I don't know if anybody's ever been in treatment or not. You don't go to groups, you don't get that cigarette. And whenever I walked up to get my cigarette, they're like, "Oh, they took your cigarette break." I got mad. I got super mad. Little did I know that I was sick. And they said, I got so mad that all I remember is them telling me to go and talk to my counselor. And so I turned around, and that's all I remember, turning around. And apparently I had blacked out, and I fell on the floor. And I remember waking up in the intake and at Sunrise, where they do your intake. I woke up, and Mary Nichols and some nurses were standing over there, and they were telling me, it's okay, the ambulance is coming. And I had no idea what was going on. But all I knew was I couldn't feel my hands. I couldn't really move. And got in that hospital. I was in so bad a shape that within a 9-hour period, I had became paraplegic from the waist down completely. And I was losing all motor functioning in my hands. And I was having trouble with vision, and I was struggling with everything. And they got me into ICU and had informed me that they were pretty sure that I had a massive stroke. And so they did a bunch of tests, and they put me through this MRI. And shortly after the MRI came, doctor comes in panicking. He comes in, and I can't really say what he said to me, but he said, "Mr. Collins, I'm not going to sugarcoat, but there's a less than a 10% chance that I'm going to be able to save you." What's going on? We're not sure what it is, but we found an internal abscess on your spine right below your skull. It's about the size of your fist. And you have to go into emergency surgery. He said, but the problem is that you're so weak and you're so malnourished that your other organs in your body is shutting down. And I said, all right, well, let's do it. you know? And so just I signed some documents, made me sign a do not resuscitate paper. And I really didn't realize how serious it was until this pastor came in. You know how all hospitals have like a chapel. Pastor came in and prayed over me. And me being me, I said, well, I get all the prayers I need. I said, but I don't think where I'm going is where you think I should be. And remember they were rolling me up, emergency surgery, and these nurses, I had them nurses laughing so hard all the way to surgery and smiling. They're like, for somebody in such critical condition, you're dying, and you got a good personality. I said, well, the way I look at it is, if it's my time to go, I'd rather see y'all smiling than crying. So here we are. And we went into surgery, and they made an incision on my spine, right below my skull, and they did a partial removal of my vertebrae, because they found out when they opened me up, that this abscess was actually a bone infection, and it had gotten into my skeletal structure of my spine. I also had a blood infection. I had a lot of neuro damage, and this bone infection was called osteomyelitis. And they came in and did all of this. I spent about 2.5, 3 weeks in the hospital, and I had to undergo antibiotic injections every single day for 18 weeks. And I'd love to tell you that scared me into just staying sober, but it didn't. So when I talk to people, I talk to them about how powerful addiction really is. Because no matter what you face in life, you don't have God in your life, if you don't fully surrender the way anybody should, then Satan's going to come back and grab you and take you back. Because I lasted 2 days out of that hospital with a wound vac and staples in my neck, and I went right back to that madness. And everybody thought I was so crazy, and I kept saying, well, God will set me down, and that's how it will happen. I remember on April 3rd of 2022, I still had staples in my neck. 3 days prior to that, me and my dad had found out that I had relapsed, and I was living in my grandma's house, and I had relapsed. Him and I got into it, got pretty violent. They got a restraining order on me. I had a restraining order against me, my kids, my dad, and my whole family, basically. And so I was living out of my van once again. And on April 3rd of 2022, I was arrested in a McDonald's parking lot. And I thought, well, this is it. I've been rescued, finally. I went into jail, and for whatever reason, the judicial system on your first offense, they'll OR you. And they OR'd me the next day. And I was bound and determined that I didn't want to live that life no more. But I was still in such a psychosis from all of this crap that I got arrested again 6 days later for disorderly conduct and criminal trespassing at the jail. Crazy things that we do. I sat in jail on misdemeanor charges, and I told my mom while I was sitting in jail. She asked me what my plan was when I got out. I said, I'm going to Salvation Army. She said, what? I said, yeah, I need to do something. And so my mom and my grandma bonded me out of jail. And they took me to this church. And there was a man named Troy there. Troy looked at me and said, we've been waiting for you and praying for you. Would you like to give your life to the Lord? I said, yeah. That was my first spiritual experience. And whenever I went through all of that, Salvation Army decided that I wasn't a good candidate for them because I have mobility issues. One thing that I did accumulate after that stroke and beating osteomyelitis is it made my mobility issues a little worse. I try to hide it nowadays, but I still struggle with going upstairs and things like that. So my mom came and got me, and I moved into an Oxford house and started IOP. And I met this beautiful woman while I was there. And I remember while I was in Oxford House, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was trying to hide the fact that I had a lapse. And she basically called me out, and I went into IOP the next morning, and I went to treatment. But I still was missing something very important for all of this. I was missing a relationship with God. And while I was in treatment, I thought it was going to be a great idea to leave treatment. I left treatment. And that just led into another relapse, but yet this relapse drug another person down. And I won't get too much into that, but it destroyed something that could have been very great. I did get a son out of everything, a beautiful son that I love. But after that relationship failed, I fell right back what I didn't do to go to. That was the drugs. And I went right back into it really strong. I had a lot of attempts to get sober and failed, and I couldn't figure it out. And finally, I was sitting one day in a house. You can only imagine what these houses look like that you can relate active addiction to. And I was sitting there and I was talking to these people. And when they tell you that once you get a taste of recovery, you'll never get high or you never get drunk the same again, they're right. Because you'll be thinking about all this stuff, and God will be tugging on your heart, trying to save you every time. I remember I was sitting there, and once again I had, went into that insanity again, expecting a different outcome. I drug another person down with me. Misery loves company. This time it was more violent. I was less present. Didn't care whether or not anything was going on in any of my kids' lives. I just got to the point. I remember I was sitting there and I couldn't face myself anymore. Couldn't handle it. So I locked myself in this bathroom and I'm trying to get to this treatment facility. I finally messaged my mom and I was like, Mom, I need to get into treatment. I want to go to Avenues. She said, okay. It wasn't 15 minutes later. I'm telling you, when my mom wants something, she goes after it, especially when it comes to me. Right? I'm the favorite. Anybody wants to know? And it was 15 minutes. She gave me a phone number. I got on the phone. I had 3 phones sitting in my lap and I could not figure it out. Okay. And I called this person and they were like, all right, we'll get you a lift. I said, when? And they're like, it'll be there in 20 minutes. I was like, can you wait till tomorrow? And they're like, no, you need to come in now. And I'm like, all right. I had learned enough in recovery that when you get the thought of wanting to get well, you gotta move on that thought. You gotta do it. So I left that person high and dry. This is one of the hardest things that I've ever done. But I knew that if I was going to get back into my children's life and have a chance to be a part of my son's life and my 14-year-old daughter's life and all the things that I was missing out on life, that I had to do this no matter what. So I took those 28 days and I started self-seeking, and I remember a man coming up to me by the name of Will. And we sat there and we talked, and he said, Michael, you're a man of God, aren't you? I said, yeah. When's the last time you got on your knees and you asked him to take your life and you fully surrendered? I just said, I don't know. But I want you to start doing that. Get on your knees every day. And I took that suggestion. And I started getting out of my own way. And I just told God, and I asked God, just take this life and guide me. I just want to be in the passenger seat, and you be the driver, and I'll just look out this window and see the view that you give me. But whenever I got out of that 28-day program, I knew that that wasn't enough. I went through that before. So I went right into another 28-day program. And I started understanding that, I needed to really get serious and honest with myself. And with that being looking like, I knew that I needed some structure. I needed significant treatment. And I needed something that was faith-based. So I had heard about this facility in Madison, Indiana. They used to be called the Jeff House. It's now called the Forge. It's a 6 to 9 month program. And when I graduated from True Healing, I got a taste of what I really wanted to do in life, a purpose. And so whenever I went into the Forge, I was scared. I couldn't think or fathom the fact that could even make it 6 months. I was like, I'm 60 days clean. I can do this. But there was a man there, my pastor, Scott Coleman. He looked at me one day, and he looked me right in my eyes, and he said, Michael, do you want to get well? Yeah. He said, well, pick up your mat and walk. So I picked my mat up, and what that mat consists of is that mat consists of all the experiences that I've lived in active addiction and everything that I went through that God guided me through to give me the power and ability to minister to men that is going through these programs, to give me the ability to say that I'm coming up on 11 months of sobriety today. And within those 6 months, I got real serious with myself. I didn't want any distractions. I didn't want any contact. We weren't allowed to have female contact. I got real serious with myself and everything. And so I just started pushing towards God and learning. And I learned so much in this program and in this journey. I used to have these identities as a drug addict, a needle junkie, a deadbeat dad, a woman beater. And I took all those identities of myself and I laid them at that altar, and I asked God to take them all from me and make a new name for myself. And He started showing me these things. And with hard work and dedication, I took every step towards that path of being with Jesus Christ. And He has reunited my family, relationships, co-parenting, Gave me a car, gave me a good job. He's gave me a purpose. He's gave me everything that I've wanted plus more, and still giving me. I mean, it's hard to believe. You know how many times I've said, and I'm a little rusty on my testimony. This is my second time ever speaking, but I've sat in these chairs before and like, when's my time going to be? You know, at 30 or 60 days sober, thinking, oh, I could get up there and do that. But you have to put the footwork in. But most importantly, you got to surrender your whole life to God. My mom used to ask me, when are you going to surrender your whole life to God? And I'd get so mad at her. You don't know what you're talking about. And I just continued, and I know what she's talking about now. And today, I'm getting asked to do things like facilitate recovery meetings similar to this Thursday nights. I got a sponsee that I'm a sponsor. Like me, a sponsor. Now I only got one, but that's all I need to start. But I attend meetings. I'm a voice for those that don't or haven't been heard yet. But there was something that was in my life, and I know you heard her name while I was telling my testimony, that was one of the most tragic losses. Who played a big part of my recovery and early recovery for the very first time. Her name was Mary Nichols. And when she passed away, I told myself that I would continue to be sober and I would fight every day to stick this recovery out so that I can continue to push that life that she pushed to save all those people, to make a difference. Because if she did it and she poured her heart into me, and I remember when I showed up to her house, and I gave her a hug before she passed away. I told her, I said, I made it. I'm clean, I'm sober. And she smiled, and I gave her a hug. You know, God has these things that happen to you, help push you and drive you, to let you be the light for others to see when they feel like they're stuck in the darkness. And now I can be here for others, be here for people that I didn't even ever think that I could. Couldn't ever imagine having a form of friendship with my son's mom. Here it is today. We talk on a daily basis. See my son. Get to see my 14-year-old daughter. She surprises me on days like this. And I can't thank God enough. I'm Michael Collins, and that's all I have.